Hi, and welcome to the CX Files. I'm your host, Peter Ryan. Now, the events industry has evolved significantly over the past few decades, going from, in many cases, simply a conduit for supplying tickets to consumers eager to see a show or a sporting event, to one that's highly sensitive to the application of good customer experience principles. Elements including cross-channel capabilities, knowing the end user to the fullest extent, and ensuring steady flows of relevant communication are among the most important CX factors that events companies need to have at their ready. Now, this week's interview is with Ian Sanders, whose career in the events and ticketing business has covered its waterfront. Most recently, he was Senior Commercial Director at Ticketmaster in the UK, and he brings a wealth of background and knowledge to this space. And if you think that Ian's voice sounds familiar, it may be because he's the host of the much listened to podcast, Cold War Conversations. Let's go straight to the interview. Ian Sanders, welcome to the CX Files. Thanks very much for taking some time to chat with us today.
Not a problem. Delighted to be on the show, Peter.
And it's quite a change talking CX with you as opposed to your other podcast interest, which is the Cold War, which will be another podcast for another day. But today we're really interested to find out, based on your experience, what your thoughts are when it comes to the evolution of the events industry, a sector that you've worked in for quite some time. Obviously, a lot of changes that have been happening, and certainly more changes to come.
Yeah, sure. No, delighted to be on. It's a bit strange having the tables turn and being interviewed myself, but looking forward to it.
Well, hopefully it'll be as painless as possible. Maybe a good point to start off, Ian, would be if you could talk a little bit about how you see the consumer segment that attends events. And we do know that consumers across a whole myriad of different elements like to take part in various different types of events. How do you see that consumer segment having evolved over the course of the past several years?
I think they have become more demanding in the way that they're serviced. They want more information, and I think the key thing that they want is more flexibility. I'll come to flexibility in a moment, but as you said, it does vary according to the demographic and the genre. But a good example will be something like view from seat has become much more important for some fans. And, there's some very fancy 3D solutions out there that are really helping with that. I guess the trickiness that comes in is especially around concerts, where sometimes you don't know exactly what the sight lines are going to be until the stage sets up. And then, potentially you have to kill seats and things like that. But certainly from a sporting point of view, the 3D plans have become, very, very important for fans. On the side of flexibility, fans want to have the ability to forward or resell their ticket if they can't attend. In the old days, it used to be no exchange, no refund. But, people's plans change, and you've seen the rise of secondary ticket sellers in the US, but more and more platforms are offering ticket resale and ticket forwarding and ticket exchange as part of their offering.
That's really interesting, and I'd be really fascinated to know what your thoughts are about what an event consumer would be looking at from the perspective of what they'd expect from the organization they bought the tickets from before the event, during the event, and equally speaking, and I think follow-up or any type of after-event follow-up that might be involved.
Before the event, firms are getting smarter. They're providing travel information. They're upselling other items that the fan might not have considered, such as advanced food and beverage or car parking or other transportation options. At the event, there's some smarter stuff happening around apps, and I'll come on to apps in a moment, because that's been a key development, certainly in the event ticketing side of things. And post-event, there's, I'm trying to think what follow-ups there are. Ticketing, well, certainly from a ticketing point of view, providers are very interested in making sure that their customer service ratings look good. So if the customer has had a good experience, obviously they're encouraged to rate against the various platforms that allow that. And there's obviously encouragement for them to use social media to share their experiences as well, and create that the FOMO, the fear of missing out aspect as well. So some of that is pre-event as well, because they want people to get revved up and excited about going to the event. But some of that is post-event too.
What's interesting, though, is the way you've described the before, during, and post-event elements. We're not even talking about event management. We're almost talking experience management, aren't we? In terms of what somebody can anticipate they're going to be taking part in, the opportunity to plan in advance to buy merchandise or food and beverage, the opportunity to figure out where they're going to sit and what type of view they're going to have, notwithstanding what happens when they get to the event. And as you say, the promotion of what they were experiencing that they can hype out about on social media.
Yeah. I think, obviously with COVID, a lot of things have changed. One of the key things that's changed is the method of delivery for the ticket. And that has created a lot of opportunities for gathering more data on the ticket purchases, but we might come on to that a little bit later.
Well, funnily enough, that was actually my next question, because in the CX industry, understanding the individual consumer, not even so much the demographic groups, but the individual consumer has become so much of a focal point for organizations. But I almost have a sense that when the events industry, it's that much more magnified. What do you think have been some of the most successful strategies that event-led organizations have been able to do to get that level of granularity, to know the individual consumer and what their tastes for events are, not just in terms of the types of events, but almost some of those inputs and peripheral things, such as their propensity to buy merchandise or food or beverage?
Well, one of the key areas is the distribution of tickets via digital means, because in the past you might know who 30 to 40% of the people in your venue were. Now with digital, you have to forward that ticket to the other attendees, and therefore they are then identified and can potentially be marketed to. What some companies are doing, and some event organizers, particularly in sports, they're embedding the tickets within a app. So away from Apple Wallet and away from Google Pay. The reason they're doing this is to get people to keep coming back to use the app. And ticketing is one of the real sticky items that really helps to get people to come back to the app. And from the app, they can obviously engage with that fan at any time.
That's really interesting. It's sort of what we've seen some of the airlines do in terms of embedding tickets within their own apps, as opposed to perhaps third-party apps, as a way of driving more traffic to the specific airline application and have people get more used to it, effectively seeing some of the promotions that they'll have popping up every now and again.
Yeah, and I guess it also creates a propensity for people to keep coming back to those apps. A bit like, if you've got the Amazon app on your phone, you can be drawn to that, particularly if you've got Prime membership there. I think, companies like Ticketmaster and Tickets.com and other ticketing companies that are out there are using this as a method of drawing fans back to their brand again to purchase tickets. But, the challenge is, as you know, with the airlines, if you fly with multiple airlines, you end up with half a dozen apps on your phone.
Precisely, yeah, that's true. And Ian, what do you see from the standpoint of technology? What are the most important technologies from a customer experience perspective that an events organization needs to have at the ready if they're going to be relevant to today's consumer?
I think the app needs to be really good. It needs to be seamless and intuitive. and in sports, which is one of the areas that I've been working in, there's a number of challenges there because there's disparate systems within a stadium. So there'd be one platform for ticketing, one for merchandise, one for food and beverage. But the app experience needs to look the same. So the only way to deliver that really is using transactional APIs from those third-party systems, but making it as easy and as intuitive as possible is, the biggest challenge there, because you're selling different types of item. And this is probably the challenge that Amazon have had with ticketing. I mean, Amazon tried to get into ticketing, but it is a very different product from selling TVs or trainers, in so much that every ticket is unique because it has a unique view from a particular area of a stadium or an arena. So it's a tricky one there. But I think that one thing that's worth noting is that the companies are building up a lot more data around their fans' behavior. And that's not purely through the app, but it's through their browsing habits on the ticketing websites. So historically, you would know that, or the ticketing company would know that you bought tickets for the Rolling Stones, for example, and would have you labeled as a Rolling Stones fan. Now they can see that you've looked at NFL, you haven't bought a ticket, but you've looked at NFL. So therefore they can flag you as, well, this guy is potentially interested in NFL, and will then add that flag and be marketing to you or building up a much more precise profile of your interests outside of your pure ticket purchases.
Ian, one of the things that I know you have had experience with is figuring out the right choice of a partner when it comes to working or representing an events organization on the front lines. What would you say an events company would be looking for if they're trying to engage an outsourcer to work with them on some or all of their customer experience needs?
I think the number one item for me would be data security.
Okay.
And it should be the number one item for anybody who's looking at working with a third party. The regulators are getting much more. They're enforcing higher and higher fines for any data breaches, and saying that it's a third party's fault is not a defense, and your customers aren't going to care that it's a third party. If they gave the data to you and the third party has then lost it, for lack of a better term, then it's going to be the customer's going to think it's your fault. The second one I would say is obviously the fans' experience working with that third party. Any third party, they're going to be being asked for SLAs, but it's a consistency of the fan experience. And that can often be a challenge with an outsourcer where they are servicing different types of client across their customer base, and to try and keep that experience consistent, particularly when the business is spiky and isn't just a constant regular flow. And the third thing I'd say is just the stability of service when there's a lot of demand.
So really, data protection, compliance, and the ability to manage customer experience to a very high level during peaks and troughs can be probably the key components of what an events organization would be looking for when they're shopping for an outsourcer.
Yeah. It's going to be different depending on what organization and their form of on sales. Mm-hmm. A concert's like to have a big spike at on sale and then a steady flow afterwards. But some other events can be the reverse, where there's a peak towards the event time rather than when the event first goes on sale.
And sticking with the outsourcer question for a second, I'd be interested to know from your standpoint, are the outsourcers going to be dealing with the flow of traffic, whether it's on a voice basis or a non-voice basis? Are we looking at any particular channels that consumers that are interested in events are choosing more than others these days?
Well, chat is becoming more and more prevalent because then you've got an agent that can deal with multiple customers at the same time. And, you know, there are some good help desk platforms out there that allow customers to query a database, and for that database to then flag up to the company that's operating that platform what questions need to be answered. So there's some smart pieces of technology out there. I mean, social media has become a major channel for fans to communicate with, and a number of venues have set up separate channels, for example, the ticketing side of area, so that those communications don't get lost in the wider, you know, why have you signed that centre forward for £3 million? In fact, it would be 30 million, actually. I'm showing my age at the prices of players.
Not to worry, not to worry. We're all getting up there. What are your thoughts about the ability to deliver CX for events fans or events consumers from the perspective of location? Do you think that if you're onshore, there's going to be an immediate advantage, or can you actually move some of the capacity into the nearshore or offshore?
I think offshore is always challenging because the fan, well, if it's voice, the fan immediately recognizes a sort of, hang on, where am I calling here? Even with the best training and the best attempt at assimilation in the the original location's culture. As far as onshore, the challenges there tend to be that the prices are higher. And certainly in areas like ticketing, the individual margins are quite thin. So it's a volume game in terms of where you're going to get your revenue from. So, you know, voice for Ticketmaster, as far as a customer service element, has declined massively over the years, and you know it's really much more moving it online. And if you've moved it online, then the offshoring angle doesn't affect you so much, or hardly affects you, because it's, you know, you can't tell who's answering that query. Sure.
So, Ian, we know that the pandemic has had a major impact on customer experience management when it comes to events. Can you talk a little bit about how the events companies have managed to adapt to the new realities of servicing their consumers over the course of the past several months?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of this. I mean, when the pandemic originally hit, there was some frantic rescheduling of dates of events. And some cancellations, and that resulted in some big challenges in terms of being able to communicate with fans effectively. Obviously, with the majority of tickets being bought online, that was relatively straightforward as far as communication was concerned. But as I said before, one of the things that COVID has allowed is some massive changes in the way that fans are serviced. And probably the biggest one now is there's a far greater appetite for digital ticket delivery. And that has changed the events business entirely. As you know, the identification of every fan in the stadium is now possible. The NFL had gone with completely digital, I think, a year or so, 2 years ago. But some of the other genres in the event organizers side of things were a bit slower. But now the expectation is there, and as you said, with flights now, it's all digital. And you know, the old argument used to be, well, not every fan has got a smartphone, but you know, I think that's going away now. Well, it definitely is going away. And some fans also require a bit more. Well, they will require some more comfort or attention before they return. They'll probably be inquiring about, how many hand sanitizers the stadium's got, or what sort of precautions are going to be in place. So there will be questions that haven't been asked before. But it's the biggest change is the delivery of the ticket in a digital way, and that in itself has transformed some of the customer experience side of things, because the vast majority of queries in, for example, concert ticketing were around, where's my ticket? It hasn't arrived yet. Whereas if you're delivering it digitally, that just takes a big chunk of noise out from your customer services areas.
It's very true. And, you alluded to some of the elements about what it's going to be like as we move forward. And I'd like to finish off on that, because it looks like, heading into a vaccine or a post-vaccine environment from the standpoint of the economy and society on the whole. How do you think, if we are able to get back to events of a reasonable scale, that event management firms are going to be able to reasonably sell tickets to consumers while keeping in mind the ability to source proof of immunization?
Well, I think it's a role, because, as you might have seen in some of the press, I know Billboard picked up on this with Ticketmaster, is the event organizer working on plans where the app can receive confirmation that person has been vaccinated or has had a recent test that they don't have the virus. So through that, you can then enable or disable their event ticket. And I think that will be one of the routes that the event organizers will have to go down in order to give confidence to some areas of the population that it's safe to return to these large-scale events.
Great. Well, Ian, thank you very much. This has been fascinating. It's great to get a window into customer experience as it relates to the events sector. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to talking to you on future podcasts.
Well, no, thank you. It's been a joy speaking to you.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.